brand new cars, broken roads, and other automotive fascination.
Autoline After Hours is brought to you by Bridgestone. Your journey, our passion.
This is Autoline After Hours with John McElroy, episode 190 for April 5th of 2013. A bridge and a backpack for tomorrow's roads. Watch Autoline After Hours live at Autoline.tv every Thursday at 6 p.m. Eastern Time or 2200 GMT. You can subscribe to this podcast for free by searching for Autoline in iTunes, Stitcher, or by following the links on our website. Mr. De Lorenzo, fancy meeting you here.
Buongiorno, Johnny.
It's good to be here. Buonasera, you should be saying.
Good to see you, as usual.
And we got the Vasilash kid back with us again, too. It's good to have you, Gary.
Boy, you're speaking Italian, you're speaking Latin, fashionation? What?
Well, it's a made-up word, but I like it.
It sounds very Latin.
I had 4 years of Latin.
Yeah.
Did you really?
Yes.
I joined the Latin Club, but only to scam a free trip to New Orleans.
Awesome.
So, some interesting news in March sales that we got this week. Market going pretty strong.
Yeah.
I mean, although it's very interesting, there's 5 car companies that aren't doing too well, and the most astonishing is Kia is down the most of any car company. And I mean, these guys have just been red hot for the last 5 years. I'm not sure what's happened.
Well, you got to ask yourself, is it a capacity issue? Okay, because I mean that has been a limitation that Hyundai, for example, has had, and we know that.
But Hyundai's not down.
No, but I'm just saying that if you look historically over the past several months, there have been limitations on what they have available to sell, right? So it could be that the bloom is not off the rose for Kia yet. It could be just simply they just don't have the cars to sell in the market. And I think that you got to give them a few more months. You got to see how that's going to be shaking out. But I mean, I think what's even more astonishing is, and we talked about this last week, I believe, Lincoln's situation.
Oh, Lincoln's.
In terms of their sales, my goodness, they're way down.
Yeah, we'll see what happens in April now that the dealers have
That's
the
the thing.
MKZs.
I think we're going to see this change very quickly. Now, all that will mean is their sales are not going to be going down. It doesn't mean all of a sudden they're going to be in the front ranks of the luxury makers.
Yeah, they have to establish an upward trajectory again.
And conversely, their crosstown rivals, Cadillac, they're the fastest growing luxury brand in the U.S. market right now. And it's not just a 1 month thing. If you look at the first quarter, they're up, I got the number right here, 38%. I mean, that's a huge jump. Yeah. And it's all ATS and XTS that are doing it.
Right, and if you look at the change of volume, the number for March this year versus last year, 49.5% increase. So those guys, I mean, but the 37.9 is calendar year to date.
Correct.
So, but I mean, it's just like, you've got those guys, like huge momentum, and Lincoln. I mean, because MKZ is part of it, but you look at all their other vehicles, they're all going down.
Yeah, they're not selling very well.
Not at all.
Well, I just got a XTS this morning. And my initial impression of it is very good. Nice looking car, really nice interior. Yeah,
the interior is beautiful.
I've read all the hand-wringing about the Q system, but
I don't think it's that big of a deal.
I don't think it's that big of a deal.
Don't.
I mean, if you want to make these systems a big deal, you can, but it's fine.
Yeah.
No, the car trumps the system by far.
Yes.
In terms of this, its presentation on the road, I mean, its lines, what they've done on the inside, I mean, the quality of the materials, it's built well. You can tell. I mean, it's a Cadillac. That's what Cadillac is. That is the quintessential Cadillac.
Be. Yeah.
And and I know that everybody has the buzz on the ATS and the 3 Series Fighter and on and on and on. That's all good and well. But I mean, I think for a lot of people, when they think, you know what, I'm going to buy a Cadillac.
I remember a couple of years ago, or whenever, I said the XTS was going to be the one to watch. And, I think the interior is Audi level. I mean, and we shouldn't even say Audi level anymore. I just think that XTS interior is first rate, as good as anything you can get in the business.
So do you think that the corporation will continue in that direction, that they'll continue to produce high-quality interiors, or will they get to the point and say, you know what, this is good enough?
We're finished here?
Yeah.
I hope not. We have no way of knowing if they're going to keep their foot on it.
Yeah, I mean, for Cadillac right now, I think, things will be good, that they'll continue to invest the money and spend it right. I'd worry more about the other brands. Cadillac's pulling in so much money for them right now. But, we just had the Avalon here last week, and that interior Impala, excuse me, is really well done. Mm-hmm. So,
yeah, I mean, they're really, Crystal Wyndham, who's director of interior design over there at Chevy, just fabulous job.
Well, as long as the true believers get to do their thing, I think it's going to go.
As long as they're funded to do their thing.
Yeah.
You can.
Yeah. That's a bigger issue.
Yeah, you can believe all you want, but when there's no money to be had.
I'm hearing that there are money issues on the Omega, which is the new platform for the Super Cadillac, and that's the last thing purchasing should be nickel and diming.
Mm-hmm. That's right. They should not go cheap with that car.
I'm hearing through moles that there have been some battles about the interior, and when I hear that, it's just like, really?
Yeah.
This is your one shot? You cannot scrimp on that.
That's exactly true. But is it purchasing or is it finance? It's usually the finance guys.
It's probably a double-barreled shot.
Hey, speaking of luxury ones, too, the other one that's in deep trouble is Volvo. And this is more than just a U.S. market problem. They've got sales problems globally. I don't know what the heck's going wrong at that company.
Well, I mean, they're touting this new wagon, right? That they're
bringing back to the U.S. market, because they really don't have a wagon right now. They've got crossovers.
I think Volvo got away from their brand image.
Does anybody have a wagon in this market now?
Oh, yeah, there's several. Bmw Jetta Wagon.
Does BMW have the wagon here? I thought they
3 Series wagon.
Because I thought, because...
No, they don't have the new 3 Series wagon because they're going to have the 3 GT.
Ah. Yeah, I think, if you think about Volvo, I mean, you mentioned about keeping your foot on the pedal and really...
And they didn't. Well, they felt they had to do something else, and everyone, when they thought of Volvo, they expected a certain thing. And at that initial contact, Volvo delivered. Then they decide, well, no, we're going to be more than that, or other than that. And, once you turn off Vermont, New Hampshire, what are you going to do?
Right.
Right.
So,
well, I think it's, part of Ford having gotten rid of them, and that was a wrenching transition. Mm-hmm. And then they got bought by, who is it, Chinese, Geely, right? And I think, this Li Shufu, the chairman of Geely, has had these grandiose ideas, and I know there's been a lot of arguments over the direction of the company, and I think maybe that's being reflected in the sales numbers right now.
Right.
Is there's just nobody steering at the helm, really going on a proper course here. I'm guessing, I don't know, but it's in a market, the U.S., that's up strong. The luxury segment's even up stronger than the overall market. To see Volvo down and then see that, this is a global issue, there's something big going on.
They walked away from their premise. They walked away from their safety premise. Now, everyone has as much safety, But if they had handled that right, people would still say, well, I'm going to get a Volvo.
Yeah.
'Cause, I'm afraid of my own shadow, so the Volvo's for me. They walked away from it. They had it. It takes years to build that kind of image up. Years, and you can blow it in
Yeah, and I think you got that
months.
right, Peter, because everybody's been touting their own safety. And I wonder if Volvo somebody decided, we're no different than anybody else, and they walked away from that brand image. But to your point, even though we all know all the mechanical bits and electronics and everything that are making cars safe, to the public, it's they don't know that. So you got to keep that brand image saying, hey, wait a minute, we're the ones with the best safety.
It takes years and years and years to build those images up, and then to walk away is just silly.
Well, I'm sure that someone thought, safety, that's not so sexy. And sex sells. Therefore, we've got to we got to
like
be
you
more
said,
sporty.
the Chinese head, I want to be big.
Oh, he wants to go after, Mercedes and BMW. He wants big cars. He don't want to talk safety.
Right. But they went away from that before this all happened. I mean, this was, I want to say 5-6 years ago.
Yeah.
When they thought that sporty would sell for Volvo like it was for the other guys. And so the rectangular shapes gave way to curved surfaces, and convertibles started being shown as this is what we're about versus
then as soon as they did that, they got lost in the
right. And you might as well go buy a Sebring, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's just it's what makes you different.
Yeah.
And but the opposite thing from the the premium segment sales, the light truck sales are really taken off.
Real strong.
Yeah.
Real strong.
It's interesting to watch.
But that's the pickups.
Right.
And even though crossovers get lumped into the truck segment, that's really where the strongest part of the growth is coming from, is crossovers. But you're right, crossovers and pickups, that's what drove almost all the growth.
And Ford, GM released their mileage numbers.
For their new pickup.
For the new engine, yeah.
Which is better than the EcoBoost V6 Ford, and it's a V8. So when the new F-150 comes up, their mileage is going to be better. But I think Ford got so annoyed with GM that they released those two digital images of the F1
Atlas
that
concept.
led up to the F-150. They shouldn't have done that, because that one pickup was cooler.
Yeah.
Much cooler.
Right. Right.
I don't know. I think they were just itchy because they hated seeing GM get all that media.
I don't know. I think GM's got a very narrow window here. The truck will not be out until, the end of the summer, right, in any volume.
Right.
And
Really? It's that long?
Yeah, it's a long changeover at the plants. So right now they've got to live off all this glut of inventory that they've got, and they're just going to be blowing those out because they're going to want the lots clear when the new one hits. And then they got about a little over a year when the new Ford F-150 hits. And Ram came very close to them in March. The closest I think that Ram's ever come to Silverado. So I don't know. I think GM's got about 1 year to really make hay, and then it's back into slogging it out with Ford with the new truck.
Well, the F-Series still continues to dominate in a big way. I mean, it's Silverado is up about 8%, and F-Series is up 16%.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's just like, man, those guys, they just got it.
Well, they also Ford has a tremendous dealer network to sell their trucks. I mean,
I've always said they can sell ice cubes to Eskimos. Those guys know how to move it.
They sure do. Yeah.
Hey, another thing I want to get into for March sales that I found very interesting is that sales of hybrids, plug-ins, and electrics dropped. Now, here's a strong market. Here's high gasoline prices. And it was especially the hybrids went down. Prius, which dominates that segment, it accounts for half the market, was down 22%. And really, all of Toyota's hybrids were down. And it's also interesting, if you Ford's starting to have some success with hybrids. I say success, you have to, it's relative success. But if you put the C-Max and the Ford Fusion hybrid together, they're a little bit over the amount that Toyota dropped by. So is Ford starting to put a hurt on Toyota's dominance in the hybrid segment?
You know, they're spending a lot of money, and I think people are taking notice. If they get traction, watch out, because they've got some very competitive products.
I think traction's a relative term.
Well, yeah.
Because, you know, all the so-called green cars are still a little over 3% of the market. Now, the one thing that was interesting, if you just look at electrics, they were up really strong. But even so, as a group, that group was down. And so I'm wondering, is this a one-month aberration, or is this a sign that maybe that segment has hit a plateau? But I was surprised to see it, especially with gasoline prices where they are.
Well, actually, gasoline prices have moderated some.
A little bit.
And I was looking at the numbers. The Energy Information Agency projects that gasoline prices next year, 2014, will actually be lower than they are in 2013. So, you know, you've got that sort of throwing a, I don't think monkey wrench would be the appropriate metaphor for an electric vehicle. There must be something else. Transformer device, I don't know. But you know, that new Detroit Electric Company is going to be coming on, and so those.
We'll talk about that, because I was not at the press conference. Sean was for us.
Well, it was sort of interesting. I mean, you know, we talked, what was it, 2 or 3 weeks ago about Shinola, the new Detroit-based watch company, and you know, it seems that taking vintage names and applying them to modern contemporary products and building stuff in Detroit is becoming all the rage, with yesterday's announcement of Detroit Electric, harkening back to the early 20th century when electric vehicles were actually vying for dominance. I mean, it's sort of surprising. You see those pictures of Henry Ford and Thomas Edison sitting together. I mean, wonder what those guys were doing. I mean, was that before or after a fist fight? You know, it's like, I want gasoline, I want electricity, you know, that sort of thing. But yeah, so here's this new company with a bunch of guys who used to work for Lotus, who are basically taking a lease and putting an electric motor in it. And
which is exactly what Tesla did.
Yeah, I know. Well, you got to start somewhere, right? And so it's going to be, you know, a high-performance sports car. They're going to build 999 of them, and the starting price is $135,000.
Good luck with that.
But they're talking about having a family, including 2 more high-performance sports vehicles. So,
how many of those roadsters did Tesla sell?
Maybe not 999.
Yeah, I mean, I don't get it. I mean, you know, here's Fisker's going belly up, Dragon A123. Did you see what they changed the name of A123 to?
No.
B456. Can you believe it? How lame is that? I got to believe it's just bankruptcy lawyers. They don't care. What they call the old General Motors, I think it was Liquidation Motors.
Yeah.
And I think the old Chrysler, where they renamed it Old Car Co. So they called A123 B456.
Someone pointed out that that's actually the name of a fire extinguisher.
What is B456? Mm-hmm. Uh-oh.
And if you go, you can go to if you go to
get sued.
So if you go to A123's website, it's still A123. At least it was earlier today. Maybe they've changed it, but I mean, and there is no indication that, you know, they've got a new brand identity, unless you look very closely. So yeah, it brings up the point of, you know, the numbers that you saw in terms of sales for EVs, and then you know, another boutique builder of electric vehicles. I mean, is there something there?
Well, who's giving them money? I mean, that's what I want to know. When you see that, geez, electrics aren't selling anywhere near what anybody thought that they would, and when you see, boy, Fisker's going belly up, and there's a whole bunch of other smaller companies that have gone belly up in that space, how do you raise money? I mean, who's going to say, you know, I think you're going to make it. Here's a bunch of money. And that's what I want to know. Where are they getting their money?
If you're an enthusiast and you have $135,000 to spend, I got to believe the Detroit Electric G9763 or whatever it's called is not going to be high on your list.
Yeah.
They really, you know.
The SP01,
Yeah.
isn't it?
Yeah, SP:01.
Which,
Yeah.
that was their internal code for it, and they kept it. I believed it was probably stood for start of production. But whatever. I don't know.
Right. Hey, why don't we take a quick commercial break here, and let's get our guest on, Kirk Steudle, who's the head of the Michigan Department of Transportation. So, Ben, let's give a shout out to our friends at Bridgestone. A million times.
I believe that.
Kirk Steudle, thanks for coming on After Hours.
My pleasure. Thanks for the invitation to be here.
And I got that right. You're the head of
Director of the Department of Transportation. That's correct.
Yeah, and
You're the cheese, huh?
I'm the cheese.
the head cheese.
This time of the year, I'm the pothole guy. A month ago, I was the snowplow guy.
Okay.
In a couple of months, I'll be the orange barrel guy.
Real popular guys, what you're saying.
That's right. I get introduced that way all the time.
Well, you know,
But you know what? I can't fix one without the other.
there you go.
When it snows, everybody loves seeing a snowplow.
That's true, unless it's gouging up the pavement.
That's right.
So just to explain to our audience, you know, why we've got a road guy on a show all about cars is, well, number one, we got to drive on those roads. But I sat down and talked with you last summer and learned a ton of stuff that just fascinated me. So I thought, you know, I bet the audience would be interested in this too.
Well, I think when we were talking, for forever, the interface between mechanical and electrical engineers in cars and civil engineers in roads and bridges is the tire. That was the only interface, and said, okay, you build from here up and we'll build from here down. And that's all changing with the connected vehicle and autonomous vehicles and how the infrastructure interacts with the car. You know, I think we were speaking on a breakfast session about the future and how they all fit together. And it's really led to some interesting conversations. But then you still have to deal with today. You know, today we still have infrastructure issues that everybody that drives a car knows about, right? You're driving under a bridge and you're seeing plywood up there. You're dodging
Plywood to
around a
hold the
pothole.
concrete from falling onto the
Right.
street.
Yeah, you know, it was a number of years ago, I remember there was the outcry that, this concrete was falling from bridges. Well, we stopped that from happening. We put plywood up to catch it. It just doesn't fall on cars. It's still falling. The bottom of the bridge is still coming apart. It doesn't fall in the traveled lane anymore. It doesn't go through people's windshields.
Which I saw. I personally saw happen. And you're just slapping up these Band-Aids because you guys don't really have the money to do it right.
That really is really the problem. I mean, we are in a maintenance mode. There's lots of things people would love to see us build, but frankly, we don't have enough money to hold together what we have at the moment. And it's not just Michigan, it's all across the country. But we really see it here. And so we're trying to hold things together. But the fact of the matter is, last year, my revenue was the same as it was in 1998. Now, salt prices are about 4 times higher. Concrete, asphalt, and steel prices are all 3 or 4 times higher. But the real dollars, not adjusted for inflation, real dollars, it's the same amount as 1998. Now, the reason? We got some great automotive folks that are producing some really good, efficient vehicles, and then all of us are learning how to drive differently. We used to, when gas was $1 a gallon, think about the way you drive, right? You'd get in the car and you'd go make one trip and you'd come back and you'd go make another trip and come back, and then 2 hours later you'd make another trip and come back. Well, not anymore, right? We all go out and we go bing, 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 and I'm done. Well, what that's led to is there's less fuel purchased in the state of Michigan, which
And nationwide,
overall,
too.
and nationwide, and overall that's a good thing, unless your budget for repairing all those roads is tied to the consumption of motor fuels. That's the piece that's this big disconnect is, what the motorist pays at the pump is 19 cents a gallon. And it's been 19 cents a gallon since 1997, and it hasn't changed. So at that, what was gas price then? $1.50 a gallon, and now it's $3.50 a gallon. It's still 19 cents. That's what goes to repair roads.
So why is the tax of gasoline in Michigan 19 cents when in Texas, where they drill oil, it's 20 cents. In Louisiana, where they have oil, it's 20 cents. And I mean, we're really low.
We are really low.
Compared to other states in the union. I mean, North Carolina, 37.5.
Wasn't Governor Snyder
Wisconsin,
trying
32.
to change that?
Yeah, actually, the governor's proposal was, first of all, he focused on what is the need? How do we take care of what we have? And it's well documented. We need about $1.5 billion, $1.2 billion annually, not a one-time shot, annually, just to keep on top of what we have.
And
right?
what are we spending now?
My overall budget is about $3.3 billion. But that's money that goes to cities, counties, it goes to state trunk line, goes to all 120,000 miles of public roads in Michigan. So this is $1.2 billion on top of that. So,
well, you're
the
saying $1.2 billion
said,
for the state, and then you want another $300 million from local communities. Right?
Yeah, actually,
you want $1.5 billion.
Well, actually, the number just the state network, so the interstates, the U.S. and the M routes, they need $900 million a year more just to maintain them. That's not adding a bunch of new stuff, just to maintaining them. And frankly, it's because we haven't adjusted this mechanism in 15 years. The governor's proposal put forth an idea for local units, units of government, to raise additional revenue, to ask the people and say, would you like to put a registration fee on? Right now they have one option, and that is a property tax. That's the only way that counties or cities can raise revenue for roads. You have to put a property tax on. So the governor's proposal was, well, let's provide them another option. They can choose to not use it, but let's at least give the cities and counties another option. And it's completely up to them as to whether they want to do that. But that's about another $200 million or $280 million on top of that, if everybody did the maximum amount, which I don't think everybody will do.
But you're getting all kinds of pushback. People don't want to pay more. Right. They want better roads, but they don't want to pay for it.
I don't want to pay more.
Well, I will pay more if the roads really improve.
Right.
And where is it right now? Which way do you think it's going to go? I mean, the governor wanted what? More registration fee, higher registration fees?
His proposal was increase in registration fees for cars and trucks, and an increase in the gas tax. And we knew there's lots of options out there, so that's one option. And what we said is, look, let's focus on the fact that we've got to solve this problem. And there's a big table, put your ideas on the table, but at the end of the day, the governor's focused on, we need to solve this problem. And we can't say no. Just kicking the can down the road is not an option, because we've been doing that for 10 out of the last 15 years, because as you pointed out, it's already on the low side. Now, the thing that makes it complicated for us is for us being Michigan, is we charge sales tax on top of that. So, when somebody asks me, well, don't we have the highest gas taxes in the Midwest? Well, my response is, what do you do with sales tax? Do you consider sales tax as a road use fee, or is that a sales tax? Because the sales tax does not go to transportation. It goes to schools, and it goes to revenue sharing for cities and villages, and counties. So what do you do with that 6%? Take the 6% off. When it's $1 a gallon, it's not that big a deal. When it's $3.50 a gallon, it is a big deal.
So why, you mentioned other Midwestern states, and if we go to the surrounding states, they all have toll roads, and Michigan has no tolls.
You're right. So there's a long history about tolls. The generation before us had this conversation of Michigan residents and said, hey, how do we want to pay for our transportation network? Because as the interstate system was being designed and built in the early 50s, I think there was 38 states that had toll authorities, and Michigan had a toll authority. The federal government came out and said, we will give you, from this federal gas tax, we will give you money, but you have to build this road to be free. You can't charge tolls on it. So we, Michigan, said, all right, we're going to abandon the toll road route, and we'll take the federal highway money, which is 80%. They give you 80%. You got to put up 20 to build all the interstates. And then we had to pledge that we'd keep them free. People think of Interstate 80, Ohio and Indiana Turnpike. Well, that was built as a wholly owned subsidiary of the state of Ohio and the state of Indiana. No federal money in it. It just happened that when they were laying out the interstate system, they said, let's use that as Interstate 80. We're going to call it Interstate 80, so it has this connectedness across the country. So Indiana could do a long-term concession deal and leverage that for $3.8 billion like they did a couple of years ago. Ohio was talking about it. We can't do that. So there is conversation now about, well, what should we do with 94? Maybe we should make 994 a toll road. Lots of through traffic. 94 and 69 are our big commercial corridors. Well, it gets a little more complicated. There is a federal provision that does not allow you to turn an interstate into a toll road because we built it all with federal tax money, so you can't just automatically go do it. In Congress, they put 5 pilots out there and said states could apply for these 5 slots and maybe do a toll road. Well, those 5 slots are all taken up. And even the states that have those, there's huge battles going on in their states about whether they want a toll road or not. I will tell you, I do my own unscientific survey. Whenever I go speak somewhere, I'll guaranteed somebody's going to ask me the question about toll roads. And probably 4 years ago, the response was usually 70%, 30 against them. 70% people said don't want them.
Have they ever left Michigan?
and that's a good point. And now it's about 50-50. And it depends where you go in the state about how much you travel around the connection to Chicago and realize that you pay $6. Or if you drive to Pittsburgh. I drove to Pittsburgh last fall. And I don't remember the exact amount. It was like $12 or something in tolls that I paid through Ohio and Pennsylvania. When I came back and figured out my gas mileage and how many gallons I used, it was equivalent of $1 a gallon tax.
Wow.
$1 a gallon tax.
Well, and on top of that, I'm seeing here, in this is the taxes. So Ohio has 28 cents.
I do.
Versus our 19, and Pennsylvania has 31.2 cents. So they've got tolls, and they've got these. So
actually, I mean, if people go to our website, we have a regional comparison where we did exactly that. We said, let's look at Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, Wisconsin, and Minnesota. How do we compare with those states? And we took all of the revenue inputs, the cents per gallon, the toll roads, the registration fees, added them all up, and then we looked at where do they spend the money at. And the best comparison for Michigan is Ohio. I mean, their population is slightly larger than ours. Their number of registered vehicles slightly larger than ours. Their system is slightly larger, but it's the close comparison. And in the end, Ohio invests $1 billion a year more into roads, bridges, and buses.
And has been doing this for decades.
Right. And the last time they raised the gas tax was 8 years ago. So in the last 8 years, they've put $8 billion into roads, bridges, and buses in Ohio. So when people say, hey, I was just in Ohio and the roads are better, why? $8 billion more investment. That's right. I mean, that's where it comes down to.
John said he'd pay more, so.
Yeah, I'll write you an $8 billion check after the show. There's another problem, though, as you well know, in that even if you raise gasoline taxes, to your point, people are driving more efficiently, connecting trips. They're buying cars that are more efficient. Some are getting into even electrics and the like that don't even use any gasoline or diesel.
These 1,000 Detroit electric cars.
Yeah, that's right. 999, right?
999.
They're going to break the bank for you.
Right.
But there's been this talk of maybe changing the way that we pay for our roads and paying on a per-mile basis.
Right.
Where I guess the government would have to go in, somebody would have to go in and look at your odometer and say, oh, you drove this many miles this year, you owe X amount of money.
Right.
What's going on in that? Right? Bring us up to speed.
There's a lot of, from a technology standpoint, there's a lot of pilots going on around the country. The two that are probably the most advanced is Oregon and Iowa. But Oregon has done the study. It's all electronic, and they basically have, excuse me, a GPS on your car that we all have anyways. Then it keeps account of if you were driving in a certain circle and you pay a certain amount of money. If you're driving in another circle, you pay a certain amount of money. If you're outside the circle, you pay another. And then when you go to fill up, it transmits to the gas station how many miles you drove in the different areas. And then, frankly, you could charge it by time of day if you wanted to charge more during peak times, so that you had people that really didn't need to be out in the middle of rush hour that could go an hour later. So the technology was there. The implementation is going to get real difficult because you got to have one in every car. You got to have one in every gas station.
And there's this big brother issue.
The big brother issue.
That isn't going to fly. And come on. And let's face it. I mean, you've undoubtedly been to Portland and you've seen that road that was coming in, and they just decided they're going to stop building it, and it's still there. I mean, they're just like, no more cars. And traffic is horrible in Portland, but they're not for building things like that. And come on.
Right. So you hit it exactly right. I mean, there's a whole bunch of technology implementation issues. In fact, Governor Snyder and I talked and looked about this. You know, he's an IT guy, right? Gateway Computers, and he said, I see a whole bunch of implementation issues, even beyond just the privacy issues, which are going to be huge. And we've just kind of taken a back seat, let other people kind of figure that out, and you know, we'll figure out where to go from there.
Another
the simple one is you go to the Secretary of State's office and you bring your car in and you write down your odometer and somebody's go out and look at it. How many people do their registration online now? Now that means I have to go to a building and I have to have somebody come look at it, and I don't know that that's very useful either. Sure. But clearly something's got to change because the system we have is broke. It's not going to work as the different fuel or different powertrains come into play here.
Mm-hmm. So there's just going to need to be more revenue generated. I mean, that's the long and short of it.
The long and short of it is yes.
And a pretty significant amount. Because I mean, it always strikes me that here we are in the Motor City, and we have some of the crappiest roads in the world. Mm-hmm. And I mean, and how can that be? I mean, it just right. seems wrong on so many levels, and especially when you have people come in from Germany, let's say, who get assigned to working for Continental or something for a period of time, and they're like,
Was is this?
Yeah, Michigan is beautiful. They love the beauty of the state, but then the roads. I mean, it's just puzzling.
Right. But there's a good story that you should tell of how part of 375 you did this experiment and you built it to Autobahn standards.
Yes, exactly.
Right? Tell that story because that's fascinating.
So back in 1994. We did this study, and when you build a road, it's going to last for a while. We design them for 20 years. So how many versions of cars are driving on top of it at the same time? But we said, let's take the European design, because everybody said they do it best. We said, all right, we built one direction of 375 exactly like they do on the Autobahn, exactly. All the same, multiple layers of concrete, same base, all the rest of it. The other direction, we took the standard pavement of the day in 1994, of which our pavements are much different than that, and we put in premium aggregates, and we said, all right, let's see how they go. And for the first 16 years, they behaved almost exactly the same. And then about in the summer or the spring of year 16, all of a sudden we started seeing some deterioration at the pavement joints.
On the Michigan side?
No, on the European side. And then within 6 months, we saw the same thing on the Michigan side. And if you drive through there right now, you can't tell them apart. The difference back in 1994, we paid 4 times for the European side that we did for the other Michigan standard side. So we spent 4 times as much money, we had the same results. So we proved you could build it just like they do in Europe. And it's not going to last the same. Now,
why?
The key piece is they make a much stronger and bigger investment to keep them in good condition. I spent 3 weeks in Germany last fall, and I've got pictures that many of their road surfaces look very much like our freeways here. I've got pictures of crack sealing all over that look just like some of the interstates here in Michigan, frankly some of the interstates all across the country. And they pay a greater attention to the preventative maintenance that it needs along the way and not let them fall apart. I mean, right here in Metro Detroit, a couple of years ago, we had big projects on the Lodge Freeway to rip those all up. Those pavements were 50 years old. They were designed for 20. You can't wait that long and expect that, oh, well, why didn't it last? What do you mean, why didn't it last? It lasts 2.5 times longer than it was supposed to last. That's pretty good. And then you have to be careful with what are you putting on top of it? Are you just putting a Band-Aid on top? Well, if you just put a thin layer of material on top, you're not going to get another 20 years of life out of it. Now, in some cases, all we want to do is gain about 5 years of life. Maybe that pavement, we say, oh, we can do this treatment and we can get another 5 or 7 years of life before we got to rip the whole thing out. And so people will see us do that. We don't rebuild everything the first time we go in. It's much like changing the oil in the engine, right? You don't just change the engine every 3,000 miles. You change the oil. It's the same thing with a road. You don't rebuild it every 5 years. You put in the treatments that it needs for preventative so that you have it over a longer time. So that's, I think, is the key difference is the preventative maintenance that happens on the Autobahn. And frankly, their funding is significantly higher than it is here. You know, we want Autobahn standards, but we're paying 2 cents a mile.
Well, does Michigan allow the heaviest trucks in the nation?
We do. We do have the heaviest trucks. But it's also a bit of a misnomer, because any truck that travels out of the state, if it goes into Ohio or Ontario or Canada, it's 80,000 pounds. We just actually did a study of how many trucks do we have. 140,000 trucks registered to run in Michigan. 6% are registered to carry over 80,000 pounds. And of that, 2%, so you know, of that 6%, 2 of the 6% are allowed to carry over 140,000 pounds. Those are typically steel haulers, steel coils, which we see driving around. Those are grain elevator or grain trucks, or gravel trains. They're log trucks. Sometimes some liquid, you know, like a milk truck type thing. The ones that have the multiple axles. But if you look at them, there's only 6% of the trucks on the roads have that. So you can't think that every truck on the road is 160,000 pounds. It's not true. If it says, you know, pick your favorite, you know, Meijer's store, or Gordon Foods or something, or Walmart, those trucks run all over the country, and they're registered for less than 80,000 pounds. The fact of the matter is, half of them are running half empty most of the time because they're in between deliveries. So yes, we do have the highest truck weights, but it's not every truck that's on the road. And then if you think about that, say, well, let's just cut the truck weights in half. So now you send 2 trucks instead of 1. The pavement still gets beat up with, you know, all the same number of axles. The company that's shipping it now has double the shipping costs. Some of the worst accidents on the freeway are between cars and trucks. Now you have twice as many trucks in that small little market, or in that little niche, and you say, well, what did we really gain here? I mean, you can make an argument all the way around truck weights about why you should have them and why you shouldn't have them. It just depends what your perspective is.
Kirk, one more story I want you to talk about is this new way of building bridges. You know, when I worked in Detroit, they put some new bridges across the lodge. I swear it took them 6 to 7 months to build those things. And, you know, I thought, boy, you know, back in the Civil War, if General Lee or General Grant had to get across the river, the engineers built the bridge that afternoon, and they marched the whole army across. Right. And you were telling me there's some really interesting ways of building bridges on site or whatever.
Yeah.
Talk about that.
Yeah, there's some really interesting stuff. The state of Utah has been a real pioneer in this particular area. And they built, think of a bridge over the freeway that you typically see. They built like 4 of them in an interchange. So in the big clover leaf, there's 4 bridges being built, bridge decks. And that was for the next 4 bridges down the road. And once they got them done, they would close the freeway and the bridge going over the top on a weekend, on a Friday night, and they would move in this self-propelled modulator, like the space shuttle mover. They'd move it in, they'd pick up the old bridge, and they'd move it out, and they'd wheel a new one in that they built down in the interchange and wheel it up the road and set it in place. And then on Monday, open up the road. It was absolutely fascinating. Not cheap, but you know, from a user point of view, they drove through on Friday on the way to work and drove home. Monday, there's a new bridge. No orange barrels in place. Now, there's lots of activity going off to the side, but the impacted traffic in a very short window. So I think that's coming.
And you said there was a lot of safety aspects to it, too, because the construction workers are working at ground level. They're not up on top of a bridge, you know, right, in its normal position. They're down at ground level, which makes it a lot safer.
Yeah, and from a quality standpoint, you know, there's somebody that's standing on the ground working here, this level, instead of 20 feet in the air. The bridge is isolated in an area that doesn't have cars going by it, so the whole thing isn't vibrating. You know, the ground shakes when trucks go by and cars go by, and you know, you're trying to get concrete to set. You know, that's going to put microscopic cracks in the concrete that's going to have long-term effect. So what I've heard from my counterpart in Utah is their contractors now request to do it this way. The other one they're doing is they're building temporary supports right next to it, and they're building a new deck, and then they, on a weekend, they push the old one out and they push the new one in place, not with the modulator, just kind of with hydraulic jacks. And that's really fascinating.
So something like that, I mean, in your position, do you have the wherewithal to say, we're going to do these bridges and
in this fashion,
and we want, you know, bid on it, but it's got to be done this way?
Yep. We do. So what we look at is, first of all, we have to have an educated contractor crew that knows how to do that. Because if there's only one person that knows how to do that, then you're at their mercy for whatever they want to charge. So yes, we can, but we have to do it in a smart fashion. You have to really bring that technology along and bring the industry along, so that when you put it out for bids, you have two people that know how to do it, and you can get a competitive bid. So we've looked at those, and you got to have the right space. It's got to fit. In our particular case, we have utilities that run up under a bridge. You might have a water main or a gas main. Well, it's tough to just pick it up and move it out of the way if you have a live water main or gas main in the middle of it. Utah doesn't have those, so there's some things that are a little bit different. Now, we've started doing some new pieces with essentially like big Lego blocks. They're precast components, much like you see a parking structure, around casinos or wherever else, that go up real quick. We're using that kind of technique to where we set those in place and then do that much faster. That's useful in some places. Some cases it just doesn't pay for itself. There's a really cool one coming. We're using carbon fiber.
What?
We call it bridge in a backpack. And because you literally go to the job, you go out to the job site with a box that's got carbon fiber tubes that are all folded up inside of it. And you get on site, they blow up the tubes, they fill them full of concrete, let them harden in place, and then they pick them up with two small backhoe dozers and set them in place. And you have this arch, a concrete arch with carbon wrapped around it, and then they put forms on top, fill it in, and you can do it in about half the time. Now, you're not going to see any of these on an interstate, but they're low volume roads. We did one out in the Thumb on M25. The first ones were done out in Maine. So we saw that technology. We said, we're going to bring it here, and we did one last year. And it saved us time, and we think that there's a place for that.
Is there a cost disadvantage to doing it that way? I mean, just
no,
in terms of just pure cost.
Nope, you save money.
Really?
It's cheaper and it's faster. It's different though. That's the piece that you got to get people comfortable with. It's different. It's not a steel beam. It is a concrete arch that, frankly, the Romans built bridges with concrete arches.
So, but who do you need to make comfortable with this? I mean, the builders? I mean...
No, the infrastructure owners. I mean, we need to make sure, because in this case, most of where that would go would be on county roads. So we actually had some open houses and brought them there, the engineers that are designing them, so that they know, okay, yeah, this is acceptable to do this. Because the designer is taking on the responsibility when they design something, then it's going to stand up. And it's their professional liability if the thing fails. So there's, a bit of conservativeness to make sure that when you build something, it's not going to fall down.
It's always a good thing.
That's right. Yeah. We like that.
That's good. Hey, why don't we take well, not a quick break. We already did that. Let's get into the rapid fire part of the show and get into some of the audience questions. Ben, let's bring that graphic up. Okay, our first question to you, Kurt, is that Utah bridge example that you gave, is that what California is doing with the bridge that they're replacing over the 405?
I don't know the exact technology they're doing, but I know that California is doing some accelerated bridge construction techniques. So the three things that I talked about are those accelerated bridge techniques, and I know that California is doing those. I don't know that they're using this self-transport, the modulated transporter thing.
Brian wants to know, with a limited budget you have to work with, how do you determine which roads to fix first?
Wow, that's a hard
big argument every day, right?
We use the program's called asset management, and it is the philosophy is if I only have $1 more to spend, where do I spend it? And that's how we prioritize everything across the state: roads, bridges, and look and say, well, if I catch this road at this particular time in its midlife crisis, I can put some patches, I can save it. I can invest $1 in saving that road. This one that's over here that's really bad, I'm going to have to totally reconstruct it. There's nothing left to do. I'm going to have to reconstruct it this year, next year, or the year after. So you look and do that trade-off. You have to do some of those reconstructs, but you have to do some keeping a fair pavement and kick it back to good.
Peter, here's one for you from Joseph N. He said earlier in the show you were talking about how good the Cadillac interiors are. Are you referring to standard things like materials, fit and finish, and quietness? Or is there something else great about the interior?
I'm referring to that, but the design of the XTS, there's real thought and
how it all goes together.
And the materials are really nice. It's very well done.
One thing that I would add too, which is, I mean, it's kind of obvious when you look at any of the luxury cars, no exposed fasteners. I mean, when you look at it all, it just seems to be beautifully seamless. You don't see any screw heads or bolt heads or anything like that.
You know, and if you think about it, I mean, everybody, basically, every car maker in the world has the same stuff to work with.
Yeah.
Okay? And what makes the magic are the people who execute and think about it.
Yeah.
Right? So you know, somebody could have a ton of money and have a crap interior.
Yeah.
Back to you, Kirk. George from Brooklyn wants to know, does Michigan have any plans to implement an enhanced driver's license like New York does with the RFID chip?
Actually, we already have an enhanced driver's license. I have one that you cross the border, and it's just like a passport. So we have one right now.
And he also wants to know, how much of the tolls go to things like debt service and pensions?
First of all, we don't have any tolls. We have tolls on the Mackinac Bridge.
Well, for other states, do you know what they do?
I would say that it goes to that facility. So if you look at the Ohio Turnpike, that money goes back to the Ohio Turnpike's administrative costs. So they're going to have employee costs, which would have those benefits, pension issues, whether they're paying a percentage of the 401k or something different. Incidentally, 65%, almost 69% of my employees are in a 401k. They're not in a government retirement plan. I mean, everybody thinks that the state has this fancy retirement system. We got rid of that in 1997. My employees are in a 401k.
Very interesting. Let's see, this will probably be a good one for you, Gary. With Fisker soon to go under and Tesla just turning a slight profit, what are the odds for the new Detroit Electric Company and their plans for a range of EVs? And he wants to know by the end of the year.
You know, I thought, not answering that directly, but sort of in a roundabout way, Carlos Ghosn at the New York show was talking about the investment that they made in Leaf, okay? And he had a very interesting way of saying that, if you look across the entire lineup, we have 46 cars, 47 cars, and so, it isn't like a big play that we're making here, because if you look at the costs amortized across all of them. But here's the thing that I found to be fascinating, was he seems to be counting on China. He said because in 2020, China wants to have 2 million electric vehicles.
That's okay. Obama wants 1 million by 15.
Yeah, except for the fact that things are slightly different over there. And I think if they want 2 million, they're probably going to get a little bit closer to 2 million than
I don't
we're going to.
It's going to happen.
You don't think it's going to happen?
No.
See, and I think that the whole notion is that if you have the technology and you have the wherewithal, they're going to buy the stuff. And that's going to make it successful. And whether these guys sell 999 cars or 99 cars, maybe in the long run it won't make it a difference, because they're thinking the market will be elsewhere in the world. The market will be in developing countries. I mean, who knows?
I'll believe it when I see it. I don't.
I was reading about an interesting new battery coming that is being developed in Israel. That is like a lithium air battery that has like 1,000-mile range or something like that.
Toyota's working on it too, and I'm sure a bunch of others.
But I mean, if you think about it, I mean, if these things come to be, it'll be a real problem for you, because they'll just be running on air. You'll have to have some sort of air tax or something. But no, I mean, I wouldn't completely count the technology out, but I just find it very bizarre that people seem to be going after like this very narrow slice of potential buyers, rather than saying, how can we make this scale? Because when the car industry started, I mean, Henry Ford figured, I got to get scale. Okay, I've got to get volume. That's going to make it successful. I don't just want to sell to the rich guys who are, buying these fancy coaches. I want to sell to you guys,
Masses.
right?
Right.
And so that's why I'm sort of a little dubious about these niche operations.
Peter, we got one for you here from Sean, who says, did you ever give the answer on why Foyt's car has the number 2? He says, I think it's because he had finished second in the standings the year before. My memory is that the third-place finisher in the standings also used 3. He said Bobby Unser won in '68 with the number 3, and he finished third in 1967.
Yeah, I think that's correct.
There you go, Sean. You got it right. No Agenda wants to know, what about Hyundai's threat of going into trucks? Should we take this seriously?
I would take anything Hyundai says seriously because they've demonstrated they deliver when they set their minds to it.
Well, you know, at the Korea, the show in Seoul, they've got a big rig.
Yeah, they showed it, and it was really good looking too.
Yeah. So
Had
I'm sure
a-
that he's
Full-size pickup or
no full size
bigger.
Class
like
8.
Class 8?
Yeah.
Holy moly.
Yeah, and it had a Hyundai chrome grille on it too,
Wow.
like off the Equus.
Well, remember last week we had Todd Pollock here, or no, it wasn't. Who am I thinking of? We had him here last week, but who was it? Was it somebody was talking about? There is a crying need for a small truck, and if Hyundai came in with a metric ton, wow, that looks cool. Ooh, Gary showing me the Hyundai Class 8. So if Hyundai came in where nobody else is, watch out.
But
That would be pretty
wasn't that
good.
report that it was they were going to do it, but it wasn't going to be until 2019 or something like that?
Oh, yeah, it's a long way away.
It's a way long ways away.
Yeah.
And so what I wonder is if we're going to see GM bringing the Colorado in, you know, the one that they launched in Thailand, and if Ford brings in the Ranger from Thailand, and you know, addressing that section of the market, because yeah, I mean the Toyota and Nissan own that market in the United States now.
No, I was just thinking, we shot our television show earlier this week, and we had Fred Diaz, and he was talking about the need for a compact truck. But we've got other questions to get into right now. In fact, we got a phone call coming in. Ben, let's bring that in.
Hi, guys. This is Youngblood, Cleveland, Ohio. I have a question for Mr. Steudle. I'm just wondering how electric cars and natural gas trucks, how are they taxed for the fuel that they consume, or are they taxed?
That's a great question.
Thank you.
In Michigan, they're only taxed on their registrations. I mean, there isn't an electric charge or per kilowatt charge. There isn't a compressed natural gas gallon charge. I think what we've said is that that's something we've got to look at before all of a sudden, you know, the whole thing flips and there's no provisions in there. But it's also touchy from a political perspective. You know, if you want to encourage people to drive an alternative fuel vehicle, well, then why would you overtax it? But at the same time, it's not paying.
They got to pay their own
That's
freight.
it, exactly.
Come on.
You know, I've said, well, maybe they all need to come with big, knobby, spiky tires that can drive through the snow on their own. And maybe we could put a snowplow on the front and they could just plow the road for us.
Okay, VRM Chris says, what's the difference? What are the difference? What's the difference in building a road in the Great Lakes as opposed to building a road in the southern states?
Oh, tons different. First of all, just think about the temperature. Asphalt has one thing that's the same from north to south, and it's the color. It's black. That's the only thing that's the same. Even in Michigan, the asphalts that we use in the southern tier counties is different than we use in the Upper Peninsula because of the temperature variations. That's one. You know, just from pure weather conditions. The second is, if you zero in specifically to Michigan, the glaciers caused Michigan some real interesting challenges. The Upper Peninsula is all stone. The western half of Michigan is lots of sand and gravels, and the water drains away. And East Michigan, where we're sitting here, are some of the worst clays in the Midwest. And it's like toothpaste when you dig down and when they get wet. It's probably the worst place to build a city. And we built a city for...
JJ says, what about these quiet asphalt services from Europe? Is that stuff doable in cold Michigan weather?
So actually, we put a quiet asphalt pavement on I-96 through Livonia in 2002. It was supposed to be, you know, it was quieter than all the rest of them. And we did decibel readings, you know, up and down, both sides of it. And it was quiet for about 2 months. So, yeah, it's quieter. What people hear when you're driving on the road, you're hearing road noise. You're not hearing the noise that maybe the people that live next to them. I mean, so you have to quantify whose noise. Is it the people that are standing next to the road, or is it the road that you're hearing from the tires inside the car? And then how many other variables are that? You know, what kind of tires do you have, and how old are they? And we all know that you get new tires are quieter, and they get 60,000 miles, they get loud. So there's a lot of variables that go into noise. But from a pavement perspective, asphalt, concrete, after 3 years, it's about the same. Decibel readings outside next to the roadway.
Here's a guy who says, I read that Michigan's going to put smog sensors along the sides of the freeways to catch gross polluting cars. Isn't that a lot of money when Michigan's short of it?
I haven't ever heard of that.
Okay. Well, there you go.
How would you even do that?
Yeah.
If there's some smog camera, got that car.
It's a conspiracy, Jed.
Actually, there is a way to do it with spectrometry of shooting a laser into the exhaust and reading the spectrum.
As
While
the
it's
car's
going
by
60
at
miles an
60?
hour?
Yeah, right.
A giant laser.
And I know that because I have a brother who worked on developing just that. And the military went, ooh, very interesting. We think we can use that. And it never got done for automotive.
They actually found out it burned out the catalytic converter. just kept going.
Roman
So
Coke says,
interesting. I'll throw it on the table for people to consider. But
no, don't do that. Don't do that.
I have not heard that.
Roman Coke says, every now and then you see experimental road surfaces on the freeway. Do any of these ever pan out in a positive way for durability or cost?
Yeah, actually they do. So north of Lansing on 127, there was a national pavement test section. That could be what people were referring to. There was a different pavement every mile, and that was part of a national study, a strategic highway research program. And some of those were kind of designed to fail. I mean, we pushed them to the upper limits of what might be possible, and they fell apart in about 3 years. So people say, oh, it failed. No, we knew it was going to fail. We needed to put it under live traffic. So, but from that, actually, all of the asphalt pavements are designed significantly different from that national testing, and we were part of that.
Gotcha. Peter, here's a couple from you. This is Abhi from Halifax, Nova Scotia. He says, I really like Volvos and would like to see some higher sales numbers. So could you ask Peter D to come up with some good marketing or advertising for them? He says, I know they're targeting towards safety, but we all know they're safe. So come up with something else. Any ideas?
We just talked about that.
Yeah, we did.
They went away for the masses. Volvo equated safety, and they walked away from it. And I think it was a mistake. And they could easily go back to it.
They should.
Handled the right way, they could make it successful.
And, they still are pioneering some safety things, and they should make great, and they do, but that's more in press releases than necessarily advertising. Phil from Walla Walla says, Peter, when do you think the four-door version of the CL will be out?
The CL?
Yeah.
2015 as a 2016. That's on the new Omega platform.
Okay.
That no one knows about.
Lincoln John says, Gary, John, and Peter, don't you think Lincoln missed an opportunity by not putting rear hinged doors on the new MKZ? I do, even though the cost and increased complexity would truly give the MKZ buyer even despite the cost and increased complexity, it would truly give the MKZ buyer something not available from any luxury car.
Well, you never know. They're redoing the MKS now.
Is there something not available on the Fusion?
Yeah. So maybe we'll see that on a big Lincoln.
Yeah. Let's see. I think this is probably a good place to wrap it up. But Kirk Steudle, thanks for coming on. This road stuff, I just find it fascinating.
Right. We should talk about connected cars sometime.
No.
The Iron Horse.
We didn't even get into that.
Herd.
Right. No, we'll have to do that. And it's interesting listening to you talk about all these different techniques that are being tried out. It seems to me there is almost as much technology, new technology, going into roads as in the cars themselves.
There really is. There is a lot going on from a technology standpoint, and it's, you don't just grab a handful of sand and a little bit of stone and pour some oil on top and say it's good. There's a little bit more engineering that goes into all that.
Well, thanks so much for coming on After
My pleasure,
Hours.
thanks.
Yeah, Gary, great having you back too. And
Gary, always good.
here. And Peter,
Yeah.
I'll see you next week.
Yeah.
Thanks everybody for having tuned in.
Autoline After Hours is brought to you by Bridgestone. Your journey, our passion.
Visit our website, Autoline.tv, where you can watch us live Thursday nights at 6 p.m. Eastern. Get your daily news fix with Autoline Daily and in-depth analysis and interviews with Autoline This Week. There's all that and much more at Autoline.tv.